So today I'm having a chat with Janice, who is one of our counsellors.
Mm.
Hello, Janice. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Janice. I'm obviously a more mature person, but that's not actually my outlook on life, to be quite honest. I'm very young at heart, so I might actually be over, well, I'm a pensioner, but sort of like in my head, I'm nowhere near being a pensioner. And what does that mean these days anyway? Let's face it,
Exactly.
well, some people are old when they're 30, Kelly. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. I know it doesn't feel the same as when I was young. Like everybody seemed old, but do you know what I mean? I think that like the age thing's changed as I've got
Well, I
older.
mean, I've got a good role model in my mum
Hmm.
because my mum's coming up to 88 and she only gave up work 8 years ago.
Well, yeah,
And that
excellent.
was as a keep fit teacher.
So tell us about how you got into counselling.
Well, I got into counselling because I left the travel industry, which I'd worked in for sort of 20 plus years, and I ended up working as a concierge at a big American company, but down in the south of England.
Hmm.
Everybody, and it was my job to do things for people, sort things out, sort of their personal lives, so that when they were at work, they were at work.
Okay.
And I set up various things. So we had a beauty salon, we had a hairdresser who came in, and I set up a quit smoking service. Lots of different things that were actually set up through my concierge service. But one of the bosses of this company said to me, "Do you know you're counseling people?" And I went, "No, uh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just talking to people and sorting their problems out." And he went, "Yeah, you're counselling them. And you better go and find out about it because I think you've got a bit of a flair for it." So I did what was classed as level 2 counselling, like an introduction to counselling. And I did it
Yeah.
at night schools, so if at night through night school. Um, but I'm sure, sort of like you can, sort of like understand, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers would as well. Life just got in the way. And I had to put my little dreams on hold of being a counsellor. I was a single mum. I had a mortgage that was going through the roof, various bills, sort of coming in. So I had to put my little dreams on hold. Roll on to, well, about 6 years ago, retirement from the NHS is looming. And having done some quite serious work in the NHS, I worked in patient safety. I was the lead on a complaints team. Retirement, well, I knew I didn't want to carry on working, but I knew I didn't want to carry on doing the job that I was doing.
Yeah.
The NHS that I joined was a bit different from the NHS I left. It was um, lots of targets and hidden figures, which didn't really appeal anymore. The one thing
Yeah.
that
I
was
can understand
appealing,
that.
yeah, was the patient contact. And that's the best bit of the job. So
Mhm.
I thought back and thought, you remember when I did that counselling course back in 2000 and something? That was actually really interesting. So I repeated level 2, then
Yeah.
went and did level 3, and then I did level 4, and now I'm approaching the end of level 5. I've only got a few
Excellent.
more weeks to go because I'm due to actually finish this level 5 in June. So it's an exciting time.
So 3 months, that's all you've got left.
I've got 3 assignments left. That's the main thing.
Is that how you count it down and the number of
Yeah, I mean, I
assignments?
have to say sort of the counselling part of the course, I've found really, really exceptional. Sort of, I've really enjoyed working with variety of people. But
Yeah.
the academic side has been a little tough. I'm not
Yeah.
saying, you know,
Yeah. I found it really challenging because I was working full time. I had children, house, all of that when I was doing my level 5,
Mm,
4 and
mm.
5. So it was really challenging juggling everything, trying to fit in a placement as well in this
Yes.
in the second year of it. And then it was the assignments and had a very limited amount of time to focus on my assignments, and I would leave them right till the last minute and then do them really quickly.
Work through the night. I'm
No,
doing
not even
2,000
that.
words overnight.
No, I would do them like on a Saturday morning, and I knew I had until a certain time, and I would do it in the last hour. It all just came together.
Mm,
Like,
mm.
I'd
Yeah, yeah.
procrastinate for ages and then I'd just get it done. Yeah, I don't know how I did it, actually, looking back on it. It was really challenging because you're not just doing that academic work, you're also in the middle of that growth and your personal development, and it changes the way you feel about yourself and how you feel about the way other people treat you as well,
Yeah.
which
You
can
know, sort of
upend your relationships, and it certainly did mine.
all right.
Yeah,
Well, it hasn't mine, I have to say, it hasn't
good.
mine, sort of,
Good. I'm
on there.
pleased to hear
But,
it.
sort of, I did, sort of, I mean, I have only been married like 2 years,
Mhm.
sort of, so, sort of,
Yeah,
maybe
but
we're still in the honeymoon period, sort of like, who knows?
like so it was like 12, 14 years ago when I did mine. So
Mm,
I was in my 30s, and obviously you've had a lifetime before you've started yours, like a
yeah,
career.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean that to sound oh, you've already
No, no,
lived your
it's
life.
okay. It's okay, Kelly. I have had a life. I can assure you I have had a life, which I think helps when you're actually,
Do you know
sort
what I
of,
mean though? I was at a
counselling. Yeah,
different stage in my life when I
yeah,
did mine compared to where you are. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But no, I mean, sort of, I think I'm sure I would have definitely struggled to have actually kept on my full-time job and, sort of done this work because you have to do obviously 100 hours of, sort of face-to-face counselling.
Yeah.
That's the idea. I mean, you can do some online, but in the majority of it has to be face to face. But
Yeah.
it's 100 hours, but then there's more likely to be another 100, 150 hours on top of that of writing up notes, reflecting on what you've actually been through that session,
Mhm.
what it was like for you personally. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of
And
work,
then there's
not
the time
just.
where sorry, I'm just thinking of all the clients that just don't turn up as well while you're trying to get your hours. That's the challenge
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Well, I know, sort of, I mean, I've been fairly lucky. I suppose maybe that's because I'm actually obviously not working, so I can be a little bit more flexible than some of my peers actually on the course. But some of those are struggling with clients cancelling and then
Mhm.
obviously having to, sort of rebook. But
Mhm.
so, I mean, I've ended up obviously with 3 placements. Well, I'm just being greedy, I suppose, Kelly, sort of on there. But obviously, I've been doing, sort of a placement with yourself at Eunice. I've do a placement,
Unisys.
Eunice. I always call it Eunice. But and I've done a placement with FACT, which is Fighting All Cancers Together over in Gateshead.
Yeah.
And I've been working down in a hospice doing bereavement counselling in Hartlepool. So I've
So it's
been
quite a
diverse.
different variety of
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah, quite diverse. And I have become, I know the A19 intimately now, having travelled I don't know how many miles on the A19, going to college in Peterlee, going to my placements. So I'm very familiar with the A19 now.
Yeah.
But having that full range of placements, sort of, I've done obviously quite a lot with bereavement, grief, and loss,
Mhm.
but also quite a variety of, sort of issues for people, because quite often, what people say in their initial assessment, once you actually start counselling, it's not always the main reason that they need counselling or they're seeking counselling.
Yeah. there's something else usually, isn't there, that they don't wanna
Yeah, I
grapple with?
mean, no, well, I mean, sort of, I'm just thinking of, sort of one of my clients. So initially, sort of, she came for counselling because her sister had died, who she was very, very close to. She was her confidant. She was the person who knew all of her. So that's why she came to counselling, why she on there. But it didn't take very long to, sort of like this lady had a history of real trauma in her life from being sort of a young teenager. And she's,
Yeah.
sort of over 60 now. And this is some of the
Yeah.
trauma that she's actually talking about. It's the first time she's actually spoken about it, Kelly.
Yeah, I find that that's quite common. I mean,
And
it's
it's
not common, but it's we see it often, we do.
But it's really
Yeah.
rewarding as a
Yeah.
counsellor in his sort of, but I mean, it's taken
Mhm.
that lady, we're now on to, I think it's week 10, and she's only now talking about the present. We haven't even got to the
Yeah.
future. It's taken
Yeah.
her, sort of a long time to discuss the past and have a look at it and see what she wanted to actually work with. And only just in the last week that we've actually, sort of, we had, sort of another appointment this week that she's actually speaking about the present.
Yeah.
So we've still got a way to go, but
Mhm.
it's very rewarding. I have to say, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Sort of
What do you find the most, challenging to work with?
challenging to work with. I don't know actually. Sort of the people who I've actually, sort of. No, I'm just trying to think. No, sort of, I've had some very interesting, sort of. So there was a lady at the hospice, and I don't know what the issue was because I never actually got to the bottom of it. But clearly, I represented somebody that had obviously she'd had a very bad experience of somebody maybe my age or maybe I don't know, but she was very hostile. And said to her, sort of like, this is obviously. I don't think it's actually working, sort of like, are we actually going to be able to work together? And, sort of like after discussion, she said no. And I went, okay, well, I respect your decision. And, sort of, you can, we'll reallocate you. I don't know what it was, sort of,
Yeah. Did that feel personal to you?
but yeah, it
Or were
did.
you
But obviously,
Yeah.
is one of the things that discussed in supervision. Um,
Mhm.
to see, sort of like obviously there was something, but I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my voice, maybe it was my face, maybe it was just my age. I don't know. But we were definitely not
Yeah.
going to be able to work together. And I had to respect
Yeah.
that decision.
Yeah. I had a client just recently who stopped coming, like, out of the blue, and I had a suspicion about why, but I don't know for sure. And I've asked for
Mm.
feedback, and I'm not gonna get it, and it's just something that you have to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Sort of, but there was, sort of that. And then, sort of, there was a lady, and from the moment that I met her at the door, she said, I don't want to be here. And it was like, okay. 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 Well, do you want to come and have a
See you
chat to
later.
start
Bye.
off with? Do you want to have a chat? Let's just talk about this.
Yeah.
But so no, this was a lady who had recently been diagnosed with cancer, but wasn't, sort of dealing with it in a counselling way. She didn't want to talk about her feelings.
Yeah.
And I think she felt a little bit under pressure from her cancer care team to actually pitch up
Yeah.
at counselling.
This is
But
the
she
thing,
was,
people have to
yeah.
come. They have to come of their own volition, and I hate it when someone walks through the door and they go, "Oh, I'm here because so and so said I should come." Like, unless it's really obvious that they want it as well, which if they say that, it's an indicator that they don't really wanna be there. They're not really prepared to do the work. It's pointless.
Well, sort of as I say, she was dealing with her feelings about her recent diagnosis with work. It was a very good distraction. She had a very high powered job, and that's how she was actually dealing with it, with distraction.
Yeah,
But,
and that's
sort
sometimes
of,
the best way, isn't it?
yeah.
Like,
So,
with
so she's got an
practical
open
stuff.
yeah, she's got an open invitation to come back. But,
Mhm.
sort of again, that was something that I spoke about in supervision. And, my supervisor, emphasized with me, sort of like, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're a trainee or you're a seasoned professional, sort of when somebody pitches up at the front door and says, don't want to be here, it's very hard to actually, sort of to deal with. Now, just respect that decision. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but
And
it's been
yeah.
amazing dealing, sort of with, sort of I've had some lovely, sort of cards from clients who've finished counselling thanking me.
Mhm.
And I mean, I don't know, having had, sort of counselling myself, sort of, it's the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's when the magic happens. It's so good, when that magic, sort of that little bit of pixie dust or whatever it is, when the client
Yeah.
realizes that, oh, hang on a minute, yeah, that's when the magic happens. Yes, sort of, yeah, no, I mean, sort of, I've had some interesting encounters, sort of, but sort of, I feel it's you're sometimes because the clients don't seem to have a huge invested they're not invested in themselves.
Yeah.
They don't see it as an investment in themselves. That sometimes I feel is sometimes a negative.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that you speak to that have got no concept of self-care, of, looking after themselves before they,
Yeah.
sort of like start looking after the whole family, the whole neighborhood, the whole world, but
People
they're not looking
often
after
do that, don't they?
themselves.
They
Yeah.
look after everybody else before themselves. And it's the aeroplane oxygen mask. I like that. I like to ask people
I use that
that
quite a lot, Kelly. Yeah, I use it quite a
because they
lot.
always say, "I'll put it on the other person first." I'm like,
Hmm.
"No, you don't. You put it on yourself." And they're like totally shocked. And I thought like everybody knew that by now. Like it's such a like a well used saying, isn't it?
Well, yeah. If you're not, if you can't, sort of like, well, as I say, another one is you can't pour from an empty cup. Sort of,
Exactly.
if your cup's empty, then how are you going to pour something out for somebody else?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's amazing how, sort of, because when I think back, when I was in some dark places, I've had some, sort of dark places in my life, but I think I always looked after me first.
Yeah.
People
That's
say, "Oh, that's very
unusual.
selfish." I know, but people say,
Good.
"Oh,
You
it's
should
very
be selfish,
selfish." But,
but it's not though,
sort
is
of,
it?
no,
People say that, but it isn't. You have to look after yourself first, because if you don't, you can't look after anyone else. You just end up running on empty.
yeah,
And that certainly happened to me a number of times in my life. Where I've just kept giving and giving and giving, and then I just end up worn out, and then go, I can't do this anymore. I give up.
no. Sort of like there's twice that I can think of where, sort of like I'd given too much of myself, sort of to other people, to jobs.
Yeah,
Um, sort of, and both times I've ended up really quite, sort of had a rude awakening with ill
yeah,
health.
yeah,
So, for me, it becomes a physical
yeah,
health issue.
yeah,
So I've learned a very hard and long lesson that I
yeah.
have to be that little bit selfish.
It reminds me of the body keeps the score. It really does, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Well,
So
sort of,
what's your sorry, carry on.
no, I was just going to say, sort of like the two instances that, sort of like happened to me was, sort of like where, sort of, I'd given too much to a relationship that wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah,
And I ended up, sort of my GP was sending me for treatment for tests for stomach cancer. Sort
wow.
of that's to the level. And then,
Hmm.
sort of I gave too much to a job, sort of like giving, and I ended up on the stroke unit at the RVI.
Crikey.
for a day when they
Did you have a
actually
stroke?
nope, but, so
Right,
if
but
I
the
had
thought you had.
such yes, because it all added up, all of the symptoms, a bit like the stomach cancer, all of the symptoms
Mhm,
added up to something, sort of more than.
mhm.
And it was then, sort of actually taking that in, sort of on board, sort of like you have let yourself get into this situation. No, no more, no
Yeah.
more.
So, as a student, you have to read a lot of books, don't you?
I have a small library to the side of me here.
Yes. What's your favourite? Which one made you go, ah, the most?
Well, sort of there's a couple that, sort of I've really enjoyed as, sort of books in general. One is called The Empty Bed.
Right.
Um, and I don't know if you've come across it's actually written by
Haven't?
somebody who works for Cruise for the bereavement
Right,
counselling service. It's actually written by them. And it deals
right.
with
That makes sense now.
yeah, it's called The Empty Bed. And it deals with that bit of bereavement when it's a partner, sort of
Mhm.
involved. When the partner, whether it's a husband, wife, or a partner, when it deals with that, the loss of intimacy. Because sort of a lot of bereavement counselling is some of it's a little bit worthy, shall we say?
What do you mean
And
by
it
that?
Well, no,
Where
it feels a bit, this is so normal, sort of, but nobody really talks about, you know, the cuddle at night, the cuddle as as you're washing the dishes and your husband walks
Yeah,
past. I mean, okay, sort of nobody talks about the lack of sex, sort of,
mhm.
and I mean, sort of, but that's not really written down. Whereas the empty
Yeah,
bed talks about that. It talks about,
yeah,
sort of when you roll over in bed and for, how many years you've actually had another person next to you and then that person's not there.
yeah.
And it's,
'Cause that's the
sort of,
time when you really, really need that person to be there when you've lost them. That
yeah,
irony.
well, that's it. But nobody really, well, I don't know. Maybe there are other people who talk about it, but a lot of the people talk about, sort of like, there's the, sort of like so many different models of bereavement, but they're all, sort of, I don't know, I find them very similar, very samey. But the
Yeah,
empty bed, sort of was the one that sort of like brought it home to me. But there's a
yeah.
beautiful analogy in the actual book about standing on the shore of grief and like the tide just coming in and it just keeps on coming, sort of on there.
Mhm,
And occasionally a wave will come and it'll knock you off your feet, sort of, and, sort of you get yourself back up again and that tide just keeps on coming. And there's a line in the
mhm.
book which, sort of, nobody drowns in the sea of grief. And that was, sort of, it brought it home, sort of to me when I'm actually, sort of speaking to these people about the death of somebody that's been so special to them.
Yeah,
And that was, sort of the one that actually, of all of the books, and I've got so many of them now, but that was the one that,
yeah.
sort of like told me something that others hadn't.
Sometimes it's, like a liberation. Like, and I don't necessarily mean that it was because the relationship was bad, but there's something about the confines of that relationship that
Hmm.
when it comes to an end through death, then that the person who's left behind goes, "Well, what now? What do I actually want to do?" And it makes them stop and think and then do stuff that they wouldn't have done before.
Yeah,
Do you know what
but
I
there's
mean?
no, I do agree. Sort of, I mean, so one of my clients, what she'd always wanted to do, but her husband had said, "Oh no, I don't fancy that. I don't fancy that," was a river cruise. So,
Hmm.
sort of like after 12 weeks of counselling, that's what she went and did. She went booked a river
Yeah.
cruise. But there's also this, I mean, it's the same, but it's got two different words. There's disenfranchised grief an ambiguous grief. I prefer ambiguous grief. The disenfranchised, that doesn't really resonate with me,
It
that
doesn't mean the
word.
same thing.
I think yeah, it's the same thing, but
Yeah.
ambiguous grief. So, for instance, if there is a death, there's a process, there's a formal process for death. There's a service, there's a funeral, there's a death certificate. You get cards, you may get flowers. There's a formal process, but then you're left with this grief of the loss the life that you had promised or had been promised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's
That's no
sometimes,
longer there.
well, it's no longer there, and it's that grief that it lost doesn't seem to get acknowledged very much, and nobody sends you a card for that.
No.
And that doesn't mean even death, but I mean, it could be divorce or loss of a job,
Yeah.
anything. It can lead to this ambiguous loss where you're left
Yeah.
with all of these feelings that had a place, had a future, and they no longer have.
Yeah.
And that I
And it's
find
it's any
is
change
hard
could
for
be
people.
grief, couldn't it? It could be loss.
Yeah.
Any
But
change that you weren't
it's,
expecting.
yeah, yeah. So,
And
well,
sometimes you lose people when they haven't died.
yeah. But we all experience some sort of ambiguous loss at COVID time,
Oh,
because,
that was
sort of
horrific.
birthdays got cancelled, graduations got cancelled, weddings got cancelled. So all of those things that, sort of people had thought about, planned, were suddenly no longer. So,
Yeah.
okay, smaller losses, but maybe not. Maybe that was a
But there
big
was
loss
some
to
big
some
ones as
people.
well.
Yeah.
There were some big ones as
So,
well. People lost
yeah,
their business. People lost
yeah.
loved ones as well. People like weren't able to grieve. They weren't able to have their funerals. That is horrific. Like that ritual has been in place for a hell of a long time for a
Mhm,
good reason, and they took that
mhm,
away.
mhm. Yeah.
It was horrible. It was just wrong.
Uh, yeah. I mean, we all remember the pictures of the Queen Elizabeth, sort of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral. I mean,
That was horrendous.
as I say, I'm not particularly a royalist, but even that got to me.
Yeah.
Sort of to have been married to somebody for that long, um, sort of,
And to
and
not
be
have your
there.
family around you,
Yeah.
able to touch you. That, yeah, it was really wrong.
But
So,
as I say,
any other
ambiguous
books?
loss. Well, no, the other one that I quite like is it's a theory, sort of compassion,
Yeah.
sort of theory. Because again, like self-care, sort of, we're not very compassionate to ourselves,
No,
sort of, and some people, sort of like say really, really horrible things to themselves. They don't show
they
themselves any
do.
compassion.
Yeah.
And I often say
Guilty.
to I often say to people, sort of like, would you say that to your friend? And they go,
Yeah.
no, no. No, I wouldn't say that to a friend. Well, why are you saying it to yourself then?
Hmm. Yeah, it is. And that is it's trying to break those patterns of self-sabotage and self-abuse, because
Well,
that's what it
I
is
do
really.
agree. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, it is a form of, sort of abuse, sort of, because you wouldn't
Hmm.
say, sort of some of the things that people say to themselves. I often say, well, who's actually saying that? Sort of, when I should do this and I must do that.
Hmm.
And so, okay. So, who's actually saying those words to you? Quite interesting. But then we get into Freud, and then that's a bit, oh no,
Oh, do you not like Freud? It was a real eye-opener when I learnt about Freud. I loved learning
yeah,
about him.
no, we're
It felt like
revisiting him now.
I think everything fell into place for me, but I don't know if it was just because I'd heard so much about the words that came from his theories and stuff, and that's why it made sense. I was just like, oh, that's where that comes from. But I went to
Well, we
visit Freud's museum in
oh,
London when I
did
was
you?
learning about him. Yeah, it was
All right.
amazing.
Well, no,
His couch and everything.
we're looking at, sort of, Freud from a practical point rather than a theoretical point at the moment at college. Sort
Okay.
of like how you actually use that theory in practice. sort of.
And how does that work then?
Well, so, sort of, if you're actually in a sort of a session with somebody and trying to actually just watch their body language and see if you can actually pick up on triggers that might lead you, sort of to think about them as children or young adults, sort of on there. So as I say, we're just starting to do a bit of that. So we've done the theory, which, to be quite honest, I was just like, this is very old white blokes who had a lot of money in Vienna, and it didn't
Yeah.
really hit home at all. But as I say, now
Well, he lived
looking
in
at it,
London as well.
yeah, but now looking at it with a practical head, which is what we're doing at college at the moment, it's like, oh, right, okay. Oh, yeah, you could see how that would work.
Mhm.
Whereas before, when we did just the theory, it was just a theory, to be quite honest, Kelly. It didn't
Yeah.
really hit home at all.
Yeah, I think it is important to make it fit into context.
Yes.
I think one of the most aha moment that I had in training was the drama triangle,
Yes.
Cartman. That just it just made perfect sense once I learnt about that. Like
Hmm.
how that dynamic works. It was
Yeah, but
massive.
where do you sit though, Kelly? Where's your natural fit? You're not a victim.
Well,
Are you a rescuer? I often think I'm the rescuer.
I can be, but that's the thing about this model because you move between the roles, don't
Mm.
you? And what you think you are, someone else thinks that you're not. You might think that you're the victim or the rescuer, but someone else sees you as a persecutor because they don't
Yeah,
want to be rescued. So,
yeah.
it's subjective. So I actually try really hard not to do any of those things and to try and respond from like the adult rather than the child, which is a similar model, but I think I've kind of merged them in my head. I don't think you're meant to, but like this is the thing about the drama triangle, and one of the things that we learned was that, well, it doesn't matter what you do, you can't get off it. And I'm like, well, what am I meant to do with that then? Do you know what I mean? If you can't get off, then you're doomed to persecute, rescue, and be a victim your whole life. No.
Uh,
So yeah, so try and come at it from an adult rather than a child or a parent,
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
and try and be like take the emotion away if I can. Or just describe the emotion, this is how I'm feeling,
Hmm, hmm.
and but try and separate that from what the problem is. And I think that's really
Yeah,
helpful.
it is. Yeah.
Like separate the person from the behavior as well.
Oh no, very much. I mean, to do that with, sort of with children, sort of especially.
Yeah. I've found that quite challenging recently actually because I've had a client who doesn't understand what that means.
Oh,
And yeah,
yeah. But is that from their upbringing?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They just
So
can't,
it's
it's
like an
alien.
hereditary. It's an inherited behavior.
An alien concept to separate the behavior from the person and the worth, because in their mind it's the same.
Challenging.
Yeah.
That's why you're looking after that client.
Well, you nearly got that one.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, well, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
But yeah,
But
there's loads of challenges that come up even after all these years. It's still
mm,
like, oh, how do you work with this? And, clients who come and ask you, like, how do I do this? And it's like, well, how do you think you do it? It's kind of like through talking, isn't it? You
yeah, well,
then find the answer.
yeah. I mean, sort of, if you go back to, sort of like person centered, which, sort of, I know it's been around a long time and I know it's got some, sort of criticism, sort of like oversimplifying things and on there, but it's still a good basis.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It's my
Sort
favorite
of,
because it makes the person important. And if
yes.
you've never had that, then it's really powerful,
Yeah.
really
No,
powerful.
I mean, sort of, I'm going to be probably plagiarizing myself in my assignments because I always put in about me personally, congruence, which is being genuine, showing
Mhm.
unconditional positive regard on there. Those things that you want for just everyday life, not
Yeah,
just in the counseling room, but,
yeah,
sort of just showing people, sort of, that you can be a genuine person.
yeah.
I have to tell you though, we did this exercise at college, and I'm obviously the oldest person in the sort of my peer group, and we did this exercise about how congruent, how genuine were you? And we had the classroom, and one end was 100% and one was zero. And all of my lovely colleagues put themselves up at 100%, and I put myself, down towards the middle, a little bit
Yeah,
towards the on there. And everyone was going, why have you put yourself there? Sort of, you're a really genuine, honest person. And I said, yeah, but I know when I'm not.
yeah,
And, sort of like, because I'm honest with myself.
yeah. So
And
you were being more honest than them then,
yes,
probably.
I was, sort of, and
Yeah,
I mean, they did get it in the end, but,
yeah,
sort of, I know when I'm not 100% genuine. And but I know I've done a lot of work on myself.
yeah. You can't be genuine all the time because that would give things away that you don't want other people to know to protect yourself and um,
Mm, yeah. But as I say, I know when I'm not. But
yeah.
my lovely, sort of colleagues at, sort of college they were way up on the 100%,
I
sort
don't
of,
think anybody can be 100%. Like that would
not
be like
100% of the 100%.
I don't know. Like, what does that even mean? Does it mean that you go around like saying things to people like, "Oh, I don't like your dress." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's not a good thing to do, is it? "Oh, I don't like
Well,
that dress. It makes you look awful." Do you know what I mean? Like,
you're being
because
honest, but
yeah, you would. But if that's what
you
you
could maybe
genuinely are
say it
thinking,
in your head. You could maybe
yeah, but
say it in your head, but not necessarily actually vocalize that. But then you're not actually being, sort of, you're not 100% genuine,
of
sort of, so you
course,
know yourself.
yeah. Well, it wouldn't be a good thing to do that, would it? But
No,
yeah,
no.
I think I am a little bit too honest at times, a little bit too cut to the quick, and because I like to get to the root of the problem. Because if you don't get to the root, then you can't do anything about it. But I think sometimes people find that difficult because they're not ready to hear it.
No, a lot of the time when you actually break it down to, sort of like, peel away the layer, a lot of it is just fear. It's fear of something. And it is quite hard to look at sometimes.
It's hard to look at the fear, or is it hard to
Yeah.
look at the truth?
Well, as I say, sort of like, sometimes that just, sort of, I think a lot of, sort of client issues, it's fear. It's the fear of the
Hmm.
unknown. It's the fear of, sort of what would people say. It's,
If they
about
admit
balls.
the truth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Sort of,
can't
but it's
face the truth because what the sky
peeling
might
those
fall
layers.
down if they admit that that's what's going on
Yeah. It's just peeling
because
those
they've been
layers
propping
away.
up something that
Yeah.
isn't true. Yeah. But that's a protection, isn't it? Like when we don't acknowledge something, it's a protection from the truth because it's too hard to deal with at
Well,
that time.
sort of, a lot of people have this armor on, don't they? This shield, sort of, and it
Mm,
serves as a protection. It
yeah.
saves us from pain.
Hmm.
And sometimes, sort of in counseling, sort of, yeah, the shield's still there, but you can maybe just get under it a little bit, sort of, to actually get to the, sort of the truth. And
Yeah.
that's again is one of those magic moments when, sort of, you've peeled away all of those layers, and, sort of, you're actually speaking to a person who is being honest with themselves.
Yeah. So what do you think's for you next once you've finished your training? because you've got other
Well,
things on the horizon, haven't you?
well, I've applied for the student loan, student finance, to do level 6 of counselling. I'm a glutton for punishment. What do you say? Sort of on there.
Yeah.
But if I can get the finance, then if I get the student loan for that, then I will sign up to do the top up, which will take me to a full BA in counselling.
Uh-huh.
After that, I really don't know.
The world's your oyster, so you're thinking of staying on with us though, aren't you?
Well, yes, I like, shall we say, the variety of clients,
Yeah. You never know what you're
whereas,
gonna get.
no, absolutely not. But I mean, you never
It
know anyway. But when those, for instance, at the hospice, invariably I'm dealing with a bereavement or a loss somewhere on the line.
yeah.
And there is obviously, you never know what's actually going to be in that first session, but they're there to talk about a bereavement or a loss of some description. With yourselves, then obviously, it's any issue.
Yeah. Do you know the really bizarre thing? Since we started promoting the service for women, we've had a lot more men come through. I spent a time aiming the service at men. It was like tumbleweed. We got like a few, but not loads. But since we started targeting women, we've had a lot more men come through, which is really bizarre.
Well, I don't know. I think men in the northeast are changing.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Well,
more.
that's what people said when I said, "Oh, I'm aiming it at men," and they were going, "Men don't come for counselling." I'm like, "Yeah, they do actually." Do you know how many men I've had in my room crying?
Yeah.
But they don't know that because men don't tell anyone that that's what's happened. But I know
And
that.
yeah, but there was I always remember an older gentleman down at the hospice, and you know we were talking about what's life like now. His wife had died,
Mhm,
and we're talking
mhm.
about, and he said a word which I've captured because it's something that struck me as nobody had actually said that word. Lots of people say sadness and oh, I'm very tearful, and the same words on there.
Yeah.
And he said his life was colorless
Oh,
since his wife had died. His life was without color, and that
yeah,
struck me. That summed up more sadness than anything
yeah,
else when
definitely.
your life
I
is without
actually,
color.
yeah, with a client recently, I asked if they could describe the situation in like using metaphors and colors
Hmm.
and shapes. And then he burst out laughing and said, "I'm colorblind."
Oh,
Okay, then maybe not that technique then. Let's
well, you could
move
have done
on.
shapes. You still could have done shapes.
Well, I know. This is the thing though, you have to try lots of different things with someone before you like find the right thing for them. And they're often not willing or it's too like out there because some of the techniques are out there, aren't they? Like empty chair. I still don't really like that very much. It feels uncomfortable for me, so it's
Yeah.
not something that I like instigate a lot, but I do say, oh, well, you could try this. But yeah, it might be my hesitation, and then the clients don't want to do it either because it's
Well, it's
just
as I
weird.
say, but there's a tool, there's a handout that we give at the hospice, which is it's called Growing Around Grief.
Yeah,
And growing around grief, like so many people, 9 out of 10 people, you can show that to them and they go, right, yes, that's how my life will be. And then you show it to somebody else and they'll go, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So,
yeah,
it's everybody is just so individual. Um,
yeah.
and
You just
that,
don't know what's going to
sort of,
work until you're in
no,
there.
no, no. But, they've got a saying at the hospice, which is, it's tools, not rules.
Yeah,
It'll work for somebody, but it's not a rule. You don't have to have
Yeah.
that one, sit of it on there. But everybody's so individual, and that's the exciting bit of counselling.
Yeah.
Certainly is for me, sort
Yeah,
of.
because it doesn't sound like it's an exciting thing, does it? Or you get to sit there and talk about your feelings and someone reflects back what you've just said. It sounds like really simple and not very interesting, but because people bring such different perspectives and stories to life about life, it's a privilege, isn't it, to
Oh,
learn about the different
yeah.
situations
No,
and
I mean that
perspectives.
that's a word I use quite often. It has been a privilege to actually speak to those people.
Yeah.
Absolutely a privilege that they've actually, sort of. I wouldn't say, sort of they've chosen me.
Yeah, have you found as well, thinking about that, the chosen bit, have you experienced that the clients usually come with things that you need? So when I was in my training, for example,
Mhm.
I was getting clients and I found myself saying things to them that helped my situation as well, even though the situation wasn't quite the same. And I had to
No.
be really aware of that it wasn't about me, but it just really resonated. And I ended up saying things. And obviously, I took that to supervision as well. But it was the universe tends to send you clients to help you grow at the same time. Is that something
Yeah,
that you've experienced?
I have to a certain extent, but I mean, I don't know. A lot of what I've been dealing with has been this ambiguous loss because so many people deal very well with the incident, the trauma. They deal with
When
it
it's happening?
when it's happening, sort of they deal with it quite well. But it's the feelings that people are left with that nobody really acknowledges. I mean, I was reading somewhere about it because obviously it's of interest to me. So I've done down a rabbit hole looking at, on there. And somebody described it as silent sorrow
Mm,
because, sort of it's not really acknowledged
yeah.
and your friends might say, so it's not acknowledged by society. Your friends might say, oh, come
Yeah.
on, let's get on with
It's
it.
time you get
Sort of
out.
like,
Yeah, it's time you were
yeah,
over that.
yeah,
Well, that's not helpful, is it?
no, no. So, sort of it's not acknowledged. As I say, society doesn't recognize it. So you don't get a card, sort of like, and, sort of, as I say, your friends might be, what, you're still going on about that? Why are you still going on about it? It happened years ago. What are you still talking about that for? So
Yeah.
community doesn't accept it. And,
No,
sort
they
of
don't
like
understand
looking,
it.
no,
I
no,
think we're
no.
quite far removed from grief and loss, aren't we? Like, I mean, like in the past, you would have probably had, if someone died, they'd be laid out in your living room until the funeral, and you would get to see that person. But it's all kind of sanitized now, isn't it?
But it's also, sort of, I mean, during COVID, obviously, sort of a lot of people were more aware of death because they were reporting the figures on a daily basis. That stopped, so we didn't do that before COVID. We just did
No.
it for COVID and we don't do it now. So, so a lot of people are still, I don't know, fearful of the word dead, died. There's lots of, he's kicked the
Euphemisms.
bucket and pushing up daisies. I mean, there's thousands of them. Maybe some people are a bit more aware of the word death, died. They're more comfortable of using that word now.
Yeah.
Be interesting to,
I don't know. They don't call it like, in our care service, it's all they call it end of life care. Don't call it death care or
no,
towards death.
towards death. I don't know. But certainly, so I think, as I say, COVID was a bit of an eye opener for people that people did die. Sort of,
Hmm.
they weren't kicking the bucket. They weren't sort of like pushing up daisies. They died.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, they were emphasizing that at that point, weren't they?
Yeah.
Whereas we don't know how many people usually die on a daily basis, so there
No,
was no context.
no. But the words were out there.
Yeah.
But
So do you
I
think that
mean, it is.
helped?
I don't know. I think, as I say, it's just, so people were more familiar with using those words rather than,
Yeah.
oh, he's passed. Where's he passed? Where's he passed? So I don't know. But as I say, dealing with this unacknowledged loss, this ambiguous loss, I'm very aware, sort of like I've had loads. So there's been lots of ambiguous loss in my life.
Yeah.
That, sort of like I'm only, well, as I say, I have acknowledged and I'm probably still acknowledging it.
Yeah, because it's not something that you kind of, oh, it's not something that society's aware of, that it's a loss when you lose your job or something. It's like, oh, well, just get another one or whatever. I think
Hmm.
for pets as well, when you lose a pet, that can be really challenging. But people think it's a trivial thing when it can really hurt you deeply.
Well, they're family, sort of, and sometimes, sort of the dog or the cat is the person that you've told all your secrets to.
Yeah. Well, they don't tell anyone, do they?
No, no, and they know all of you.
They
So
do.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's very hard.
Yeah. Well, Janice, we've been talking for nearly an hour. Can you believe it?
I'm going for my lunch.
Before we wind up,
Hmm.
what would you say to someone who's thinking about coming for counselling but isn't sure?
I think it's a case of give it a try. Just give it a try. It's really hard, sort of. I've been there, sort of like walking in and meeting somebody who you've no idea who they are. It's very difficult. I do appreciate that, but sort of, the people, we're all human beings, and I think, sort of as a counsellor, we've got a warmth about us that, sort of provide a warm and welcoming, it's a safe space, sort of
Yeah.
like we're not going to go on TikTok or Facebook and tell everybody, sort of everything, sort of about you. We've got rules, we've got regulations, what is said in the room is going to stay in the room. And it's, a lot of people don't have anywhere to sort of talk about just them and how they feel about life.
Yeah.
So go
And
for it.
that's the thing
Just
as
go
well.
for it.
So sometimes people come to counselling and they don't think they can say the thing out loud, but they can. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
they can say it there. And obviously there's rules around, like, if someone's at risk, we'll obviously have to pass it on. But even if they think it's the like worst thing in the world, it's okay to say it in that room,
yeah, yeah.
and
And
there's
sometimes
nowhere
you
else for
no,
that.
and there's no place, sort of, as I say, sort of like, you might trust a friend, but then, sort of like, can you trust a friend with everything?
And
Maybe not.
the thing is as well, so you get clients who've told their friends so many times, but they need to keep saying it, and people run out of patience. Whereas a counsellor's there and they understand that you have to say it lots of times, and that's okay.
Well, so but a lady, I had a first session with a lady yesterday. We will get to, we'll peel a few layers before we actually get to the real reason that she's there. But I said to her, this is your space. Can you tell me in your life where once a week for an hour, you can come into a safe space and just talk about you and what you want to talk about? And she went, well, I can't. I've got 4 kids and, all this. And I went, yeah, okay. So this is 1 hour just for you, you
Yeah.
know? And she was like, oh, can I talk about anything? And I went, yep. And she was like, that's amazing. And I
Yeah.
said, you know, I said, sort of, and it doesn't matter what it is. I said, sort of like, I said, I'm not easily shocked. Sort of like, I've had a life. And she went, yeah, okay, that's good. And that really was quite interesting because quite often when you get to the ends of a session, like you've done 12 sessions with somebody will ask, sort of like, oh, can I give you a hug? And I would say, yeah, okay, no problem. But this was the first person in sort of like how many I'm up to sort of 80 something client hours. The first time that somebody has asked, could they hug me after one session?
So they must have got something really special out of that session then.
Yeah. It did. It felt really
But
good, sort
then
of.
as well, some people are just huggier than others, more
All I know,
tactile.
but sort of like, as I say, not after, as I say, I've had hugs after 12 sessions, but sort of like to be asked if they can give me a hug after the first session. That's a first for me, Kelly. I'm taking it.
Oh,
It's a
well,
first.
well done, well done. Okay, shall we round that up? Thank you so much for
Yes.
joining me, and yeah, I'll see you next week.
Yeah. You take care. All right.
And you.
Bye bye for now. Bye bye.
Bye.